Welcome, one and all, to the Success Curious podcast. It's been renamed, rebranded, rebadged, just so it comes into line with my book. Now, this episode is a solo effort. It's only the second time that I've done an episode all by myself. And the reason why I'm doing it is for two things. One, I have my book, Success Curious, coming out this very week, January 28th. It'll be hitting bookshelves and all that sort of good stuff from then. But also, team, I've had a stack of people ask me, obviously, what it's like to write a book. So I figured in the pursuit of success and what it looks like to us, and hopefully in making it a bit more tangible for a lot of people, I thought I'd share with you a bit of my trip when it came to writing this book, the wins, the suffering around some of it, and put a bit more reality around it, because I know that for a lot of people, writing a book is either something that they are really they really, really want to do it, or it's something that they are told that they should do. Whenever I have this conversation around my book, everybody has turned around and said, "Oh, I'd love to write a book one day," or "Oh, I could never write a book," or "Oh, yeah, look, I keep getting told I should write a book." Well, I think that if I share my trip last year when I wrote Success Curious, it might make you guys feel, well, shit, if a lad like this can do it, and I know this sounds cliche, but if a lad like this can do it, then maybe I do have a genuine shot. Because from a DNA perspective, I am not exactly designed to write a book in any way, shape, or form. Now, when I was taking my English exam at 16 years old, I spent most of that English exam counting the bricks in the gym, because writing essays was really something that was out of my attention span remit, right? So and before ADHD became popular and really commonly known and commonly diagnosed as well as it is today, I just thought that I just couldn't be bothered. So when my English teacher finds out that I've managed to write a book and have it published, she's going to fall off a chair when she's Drummond. Because, yeah, for all intents and purposes, she struggled to get me to write an essay in 2 years. And that was only for sort of what, 1,000 words or 500 words or whatever it was back then. And then coming into my degree, my biggest test was writing a 3,000 word dissertation for the final chapter of my third and final year of my bachelor's degree. And that was probably the biggest mission ever until last year, of course. But I'm not built from an attention point of view, I'd almost say from a perspective of someone that has that sort of dedication and drive. If I'm not in flow state, that I really struggle to reach those things that are really essential for when you're doing something like writing a book, and having the persistence as well. Now, when I am in flow, so for example, if I'm calling an auction or if I'm doing a talk or whatever, then it's very, very easy, because it's the thrill of the moment. It's surrounded by chaos, it's pressure, and that brings the best out in me. But when you're writing a book, all of the pressure is created for yourself, by yourself, and to yourself. And I found very quickly last year that that kind of pressure puts me in a bit of a weird, slightly dark place, if I'm being completely honest. When the pressure's on me, but it's pressure that I'm carrying for an outcome that's outside of me, that's when I rock and roll. That's when I have loads and loads of fun. But this was all about me. And believe it or not, lots of people tend to turn their nose up when I say this, despite everything, because of everything that I do. I really don't like the spotlight. I hate the spotlight. In fact, if you hear this before the book launch, which is on February 12th in 2025, or if you hear this afterwards, you'll understand why the book launch, instead of me banging on about me and the book and all that sort of stuff, I've set it up to record a podcast with a panel of 4 guests that have been on this show before. Mel Yu, Shannon Kennedy, Scott Bateman, and Rick Rushton. And that's because I don't like the attention. But I know that I will be able to show out if I put myself in that facilitator role and ask questions and bounce off opinions from 4 wonderful, wonderful people and 4 brilliant minds. And that will sell the book in itself. So when I say I don't like the spotlight, you can look at my history and see that that is actually the case. My birthday is the worst day of the year for me because I hate having the attention. Very, very weird. So writing a book, when I first even remotely thought about getting this book together, it was when I was chatting to my coach at the time, Shannon Kennedy, who deserves a heck of a lot of credit for this trip that I've been on, okay? Because it was Shanna that actually opened the door to give me the opportunity to get a publishing deal in the first place. And she's also the person that really nudged this sort of train of opportunity in the right direction. Because as like everybody else, lots and lots of other people who don't end up writing a book, you have that notion of, oh, I'd love to write a book one day. And then those 2 words, one day, end up becoming the absolute killer of your existence. And you never ever get anything done that you say you're going to get done one day. It never happens, right? It just never happens. So we were having a chat one time, and she'd helped me through one transition out of the corporate position I was in as Century 21 as head of training into that self-coaching, into that coaching space, and really becoming self-sufficient again as a sole business trader. And it was in the October that she said, Andy, do me a favor, write me a book structure and send it through. I'll have a look at it and we'll sort of marinate on it so that next year we could do a self-publishing project together. Because Shanna was really, really keen. One of my goals is to be on more stages and give more talks and make success more accessible for a lot more people. So if I could do that at scale in my state of flow, which is in front of a whole bunch of people working on their behalf, then I'm confident that I'll be able to bring value. But Shanna quite rightly pointed out that a book is kind of like a business card on steroids when it comes to getting on said stages, okay? And it makes complete sense. So I followed along with the train of thought and did myself a book structure. I sent it through to her. I'd kind of already got one sort of part done from a couple of years ago when Rick Rushton managed to get me in touch with one of the decision makers at Wiley, the publisher. And back then, the book wasn't ready. I wasn't ready, though, more to the point in terms of my mental framework and who I was and where I was in my life. All right. So I completely agree that Wiley, although they did entertain me, they ultimately turned me down at that stage, which I completely agree with, to be honest. So I did the book structure, sort of updated it to be a bit more of my time and whatnot, sent it through to Shanna. And she then was a bit naughty. And I say that now in a wonderful way. At the time, I was concerned that it wasn't the right time for me to write this book. But what she did was I sent it through to her, and then she sends me an email back saying, Andy, I'm going to make an appointment to connect you with Leslie Williams, who is the publisher, who's the publisher in chief for Major Street Publishing. I'm going to send through her structure, your structure to her, and we're going to have a conversation around the concept of this book. Make sure you turn up, make sure you make yourself available. Here's your chance. Okay. So I have this conversation with Leslie, and Shanna's in the background there, sort of adding her 2 cents in as and when. And Leslie, after that conversation, said, well, okay, well, maybe we'll have another conversation. So I was like, okay. And it was a weird one because at the time, Leslie didn't really, she really doesn't. She doesn't give much away in terms of what she's thinking or a train of thought or anything like that, right? She'd be really good at poker, to be honest. So now Leslie sort of said, right, well, let's have another discussion. So we had another discussion. And then she asks me to put a submission together. Now, which is, again, it's a very common thing that you have to do if you want to go through a publisher. Okay. And these submissions can generally take sort of 6-7 hours if you want to do them properly, because you not only need to do a synopsis of the book, you need to do things like a marketing strategy, how you position it, your key demographics, the sort of what, where, why, when, how, who sort of stuff, and put a bit of a blurb together about it as well. So that took a little while, sent that through, and I didn't hear anything from her. Now, this was coming on towards the middle of December. On the 22nd or 23rd of December, I get an email from Leslie asking me if I would be able to provide her with a sample chapter by January the 2nd. Now, at that time, I was in the midst of, I was about to go away on holiday with my then partner, to Bali, and it was our first serious trip together. And I didn't feel that I would have the time. I wanted to spend the time focused on, being present and all that sort of stuff. But in consultation with my former partner and Shanna, I thought, you know what, I'll take the laptop and I'll give it a go. Shanna actually said to me, Andy, I've never seen this before. Where someone's just had a chance given to them out of the blue. You've got to take it. And if it wasn't for Shannon really laying it down heavy on me, then I probably would have skipped the bar. I probably would have missed it. I probably would have gone, look, I'm sorry, I won't be able to have time to do that. And it would have been opportunity closed, window shut. But, because Shannon really pointed that out to me, and I didn't realize how important and how lucky I was to even get a chance, I gave it a go. So managed to get a sample chapter to her by January the 2nd and heard nothing for a good few days. In fact, it was January the 12th, I believe, when I was at the airport on my way to somewhere for something, that I got an email back from Leslie saying that my sample chapter was crap. So I thought that was the end of it there. She gave me some really good feedback, but she sort of basically said to me that it reads more like a sales manual, not as an actual book, which again made absolute sense. And I was really grateful that she was as upfront as she was, but I thought that was the end of that. 3 days later, I get a contract through for a publishing deal from Major Street Publishing and the terms and the conditions and all that sort of stuff, which was a big surprise to me. Now, at that point, I'd kind of got myself into the headspace of writing a book, and sort of became slightly enamored at the prospect of writing a book in 2024. But I was certainly not committed to it. My coaching business was still very much in its infancy and wasn't really self-sustaining. Auction business-wise, that's ticking along. That's been going on fine and still continues to do so. But from a revenue perspective, a personal revenue perspective, I didn't think I was ready because I didn't have the sufficient money to be able to back myself if I needed to go into hiding to write this book. So I get this publishing deal through, and then Shanna, again, she deserves so much credit. She couldn't believe it. This just does not happen. There's people that spend their lives trying to get a publishing deal and never end up doing it. Basically, she didn't say this, but in a manner of words, she said, basically, Andy, you're being kissed on the dick. Don't waste the opportunity. So it was one of those ones where Leslie said to me, do you think you can get us a manuscript by March 31st? So we're effectively talking around about 10 weeks to get a book finished and to her. Big task, especially when you consider that I'm not a full-time author, right? So I'm a dad. I was a partner at the time of a relationship that I vested a lot of my effort into because I thought that it was going to be I thought it was going to be a forever relationship. Businesses, trying to continue to grow the coaching business. It was very much in its infancy. So I had enough on my plate as it is, continuing on with this podcast, all that sort of stuff. But again, Leslie said, this is a big chance. This is a once in a lifetime. Don't mess it up. So I, in consultation with my partner at the time, we went, yeah, okay, let's give it a go. So I did. And so, and I took Shanna's advice. She said, right, go find yourself somewhere, go take yourself somewhere for 5 days, do nothing else, clear your diary, make sure the people that want to get hold of you can get hold of you, but nobody else. So I booked an Airbnb apartment in the salubrious location of Footscray, and like a high up top, like real high floor apartment. So I didn't have any temptation to go away or go out or leave or whatever. And I gave it a crack at trying to write a book in 5 days. Now, considering team, a lot of you know by now that, and I've mentioned on a few podcasts, that I was formally diagnosed with acute ADHD in 2023. So just before I started on this book process. And so my habits are not really conducive to being locked in a room with one task for 5 days. For the normal person, that sounds like torture, but for someone that's riddled with ADHD, it felt a little bit like a life sentence. And I was a bit worried that I was going to let a lot of people down on this. So, I set a mini goal with Hib, my former partner, and set a goal to get to a certain word count by a certain time. She was going to come and visit me. I didn't manage to get to that word count, and it felt like I let her down. And she made it clear that I'd let her down, which was interesting. But at the end of that 5 days, I managed to knock out, although I was trying to get a whole book done, which is around about 40 to 45 to 50 odd thousand words. I managed to get about 28,000 words done in that period of time, which, by any measure, would be seen as a massive win. Obviously, in my head, something I'm working on, instead of seeing the good that I've done, I'll be looking at the stuff that I haven't done. And so I felt there was a little bit of a fail in that respect. But we were on our way. We were on our way to getting this book done. Obviously, life kicked into gear because that was middle of January and everyone's businesses then wake up. So you get really, really busy. And so I was reserved to getting the book written at like late at night. It would be night times. It would be if I could get a spare hour during the day. But one thing that came not only with the pressure of writing a book, but the pressure of the deadline as well. The deadline did two things. The March 31st deadline did two things. One, it made me do it, right? Which is amazing. But two, the level of anxiety that I felt that I put onto myself, it got to the point where I couldn't have 5 minutes rest mentally or otherwise without thinking that I should get some of my book done. And that's a pretty anxious feeling, right? That's a really anxious feeling. 24/7. And it didn't end after the deadline, but I'll talk about that in a bit. So I had the pressure of getting the book done by the 31st of March. At stages, it didn't look like it was going to happen. But by hook or by crook, I managed to get 43,000 words done. I knew I didn't think it was the finished article. But I think Leslie thought she was hoping that it would be at the time. But it's the first time I've ever tried to write anything that big, let alone a cohesive book, right? So I was confident that it was going to be, maybe the basics, the foundation, the skeleton, or just straight trash, because I had no idea. Got the manuscript sent through to Leslie, and a week later, I learned a lesson which I would highly recommend that you pay attention to, team. Don't read the first line of an email and then start driving somewhere, because you end up doing your head in, wondering what the rest of the email says. Very, very bad idea. But I did that, and I read the first line of this email from Leslie, which said, I don't feel we can move forward with this as a finished article. I don't think we can move forward with this as a published book, which to me sounded like the end of the road. And bearing in mind, I'd put myself through a small degree of mental hell to get this book done. And I know it's first world mental hell, gang. So, there's lots of worse things that can happen in the world. But for me at the time, it was shit. So I was gutted. I was devastated. And I was sort of, because I'd come round to the whole notion that I might have a book out by, within the year, which could, potentially change how I run the course of my professional life and moving forward. So to have that dashed was really annoying. And so I read the full email, and thankfully Hibber sort of read it for me and sort of said, look, maybe it's not the end of the road. And I had a conversation with Leslie, and Leslie was really worried that I was going to lose my shit at her, because I think she's had in her time as a publisher, I don't think she's not really admitted it to me, but I think she's had lots of authors really get stuck into her when she's given feedback, because for a lot of people, it's like their baby, right? I can understand why people would get really, really defensive over their work. It's a massive effort. But she needs to be honest, because it's her business as well as the authors. And a lot of the time, she's giving feedback for the benefit of the authors. She doesn't want the author to go out with a published book that sounds, looks, reads like shit, right? Doesn't reflect well on them either. So I had a phone call with her the next day, and she gave me two choices. She said, look, I could give you the artwork for the book for the front cover, because we'd already worked on that and got that done. So she must have seen something in me, I guess. And you can have that, but don't worry about paying us for it. We'll sacrifice the cost, and you can go on your merry way and do a self-publishing thing. Or you're going to need to commit to an editor that is outside of our publishing business, because we haven't got enough time and dedicate and attention to be able to give this the amount of effort that it needs from an editing point of view. So I asked her what the cost of that was and what the process was, and it'd be, get with an external editor. It's going to cost you $5,000, and she'll work through that with you, and we'll set another deadline. So I said, well, look, I've come this far, and I'd committed to the deal, which included a $15,000 outlay for some books that I'd have to house here in my house. And then I went to screw it. I'm in. So decided to give it a red hot crack, and got introduced to Jess Lomas, who has so much patience, it's not even funny, and she needed it with me. So we started off our sort of process from an editing point of view, and I didn't realize that the hardest part was not the initial manuscript. The hardest part is, without a shadow of a doubt, this next phase, which is editing. Now, when you've got the wiring that I have, and a bunch of you will resonate with this, once you think you've done something in your head, and once you think you've completed it in your head, you already think about the next 2 or 3 things that you can do. I'd done that initial manuscript. I'd finished that initial manuscript. As a result of that, my train of thought was already thinking about the next 2 or 3 things that I was going to do. And so dragging myself back into book writing mode was incredibly tough. It was really, really difficult, if I'm being honest, because I thought I'd finished it. So my enthusiasm towards it was difficult to sort of really dig up and sort of retrieve from the well, because it had knackered me out in the first place. And Jess said, with unequivocally, that this is going to take a lot of work. So one of the good things that my first meeting with Jess, one of the good things about it was, before we cracked on with anything, she needed to know that she could work with me as much as I needed to know that I could work with her. And that's something from a service point of view that we should all be thinking about, right? Because not all business is good business. The great thing about the conversation, though, was that she took the time to get to know me. Because ultimately, a book is a very, very personal thing. This isn't this wasn't going to be a ghost writing exercise. This isn't going to be one of those ones where you pay a business, a coach or a sales coach leader, or, one of those co-op things where you get asked to write a chapter and then the rest of it's sort of written generically by, Zig Ziglar or Brian Tracy or someone like that. And then you can sort of present it as your work as such. This was all my stuff. And not to say that that's a bad way to go. And in hindsight, I probably could have done with a bit of that. But the thing with Jess was she needed to make sure that this was all going to still be from me. And so she needed to tune into me. And that's what she did tremendously well. And from there, we went on a March, April, May, June, July, August, 5-month process of editing, which sounds like a long time, but when you're running businesses and running kids around and trying to keep a relationship together and going away on holiday and all those sorts of things, life, not the easiest thing in the world, because part of the editing process was the initial manuscript had a foundation, but it needed substance to back it. So I had to go through and read a shitload of research papers, of psychology studies, of university doctorate papers, all these weird and wonderful and very, very geeky things that helped to substantiate anything that I had to say. Because otherwise, it's just me talking fluff. And who gives a shit about some English guy that no one's ever heard of, right? So I needed to put some power behind some of the stuff that I had to say. Not the easiest thing in the world to do. And reading through some of those papers was very, very challenging because it's in university language, half of it, right? Which it's like Shakespearean stuff. So it was a really, really interesting ride. And the other thing that I had to really get a grip of, which is something that I've really learned about this process, is one of the first bits of feedback that Leslie gave me when I sent through some work to her. She said in an email, the first line of an email, Andy, ... where's all the swearing? Now, as a bunch of you already know, I have a propensity for the profanity. I know some big words, but I follow the Billy Connolly school of logic, right? Where you know lots and lots of big words, but you prefer the 4-letter words, right? Because they just say the same thing. They just do it a lot quicker. And so I'd had a lot of conversation with Leslie, and she knew that. She was totally cool with it, but she didn't see it reflected in my work, and therefore it didn't sound like it was coming from me. And she was backing me, which was a bit of a penny drop moment there, because when someone offers you a deal like this or an opportunity like this, what we all need to understand and recognize in that moment is that whoever it is who is giving you an opportunity is not giving you an opportunity because of what you can do. They are giving an opportunity to you because of who you are. Now, I don't care how technical a book it is you are thinking of putting forward, or how black and white, right? So how much it is factual, like in terms of black and white, this is absolutely the answer because science backs it, blah, 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 blah. How much of it is opinion, like a lot of my stuff? Because everybody has opinions, and loads of people know the stuff that you know from a factual point of view and more, most likely. So it can't be the knowledge that these people are backing or believing in, because they could go to loads of people and they'd all have the same knowledge. It has to be the person behind the knowledge that these people are supporting. I really didn't notice that until she said that. I really didn't realize it. And it's really part of this book has been about ownership for me. And again, I'll talk about that at the end. But when she said that, I was like, right, okay. And as I was working with Jess, and she was very, very keen on pushing the Andy narrative, the Andy way of doing, the Andy school of thinking, it really started to dawn on me that, and that was one of the things that challenged me the most, is to make sure that I was just talking from me. It was just me talking, not who I thought I needed to be. It was just me. Really, really hard for me. I'm a people pleaser by nature, which is not cool. So did the editing process. That very nearly killed me. And I'll be completely frank, there were a number of 2:30 a.m. sat in front of the laptop questioning life, on the odd occasion, a couple of tears in my eyes, got a bit dusty, the old office, knackered, drained, money just absolutely dissipating from my account because I'd taken my eye off coaching, or I'd reined in the coaching. I was just doing auctions. So my revenue, my personal revenue was down substantially. I was trying to build the relationship that I thought was going to be the relationship. It ended up not being the relationship. And I think that is to a large extent my fault, because of how distracted I was by this book. But it's one of those things that, in hindsight, I'll say that I really, really enjoyed doing. And it was a worthwhile process. Well, actually, no, I probably won't say that I enjoyed doing it. But it was a process that took me to some places that I'd never been before mentally. Now, that can be really, really dangerous if you've got mental health issues or whatever, which I have, mental health challenges. And so there were a couple of occasions where it did get a bit dark, which isn't cool. And it's not something that I'd recommend. So the first lesson, if you're thinking of writing a book, understand how hard this is going to be. And when you understand how hard this is going to be, appreciate the fact that you're not going to be the best version of yourself during this process. Once you accept that, I would then highly recommend that you make sure that whoever's around you that you love has a clear understanding that that is the case. Because if you want to get this book done, it's going to take attention away from every other facet of your life if you want to get it done properly. And I'm not putting sauce on that. It will. I feel like I need to make sure that I lay out the reality of writing a book to you, because if you do what I did and go into it with a degree of ignorance and naivety, then it will cost you a similar amount of stress and anxiety and loss than what it's cost me. And I wouldn't want that if I were you. So as long as you go into it eyes wide open, and the people that are around you that you love go into it eyes wide open, then you'll be okay. And then you've laid the runway for you to bring this book into land. So we managed to get it done by August 31st, and there was still some jigging about that needed to be done. But, and we were checking in with Leslie fairly regularly, and she was really happy with what was coming out. And Jess did an insane job, an incredible job, Jess Lomas. So if you are looking for a publisher, reach out to me, DM me, and I will definitely put you in touch with her, because she's an absolute gem of a human being. I owe her plenty. So if we can get her a few more gigs, then that'd be wonderful. But we got it done by the end of August. And from there, I actually felt like, right, now I can breathe again. It actually felt like such a load had been lifted off my shoulders, and I could see life once more. Everything was dull. Like, I was going through a depressive episode where the colors don't seem as colorful and whatnot, but it kind of felt like I'd come out of one of those phases and I could see the world again. And I had space in my brain to think about other stuff, which was just the best. But unfortunately, some of the stuff that I had to think about was coming to the reality and the realization that I had neglected certain things in my life that ultimately I lost, which is a shame. It's a lesson that I'm glad I've been through, but it's certainly a lesson that came at a price. So the second thing I would say to you is make sure that you have sufficient resources in stock before you go on this book writing process. And I am not just talking about financial, right? I'm not just talking monetary. I'm talking about emotionally. I'm talking about spiritually. I'm talking about strength of connections with people, be it loved ones, family, friends, kids, whoever. Make sure that you have got plenty of all of those things in the tank, because they are going to be used. Those resources are going to be used over this journey. Again, I'm laying it thick to make sure that you go into these things eyes wide open. And these are things that you can do. These are things that you can absolutely make sure that you've got in abundance so that you can go into this feeling fully prepared and fully ready. So that's the second thing. Now, the third thing that I would highly recommend is be open to the consequences of writing a book in terms of what it does to you as a human being. Now, through the trials and the stresses and the tribulations and all that sort of stuff, the pressure shapes you, right? And I found that the book most certainly changed who I am. It really, really did. Now, coming back to the thing that Leslie pointed out in terms of where's the swearing and the realization that opportunities are given to you because of who you are, not what you do and what you know. The book started a chain reaction within me around taking ownership of who I am and absolutely accepting who I am not. And we say that again. It'll help me to start understand and accept who I am and accept who I am not. See, before this book, and this is probably one of the reasons why I really struggle from an identity point of view with respect to understanding whether I was right for a book, understanding whether people were going to read this book, understanding whether the timing's right to write this book. And a lot of that's down to the fact that I really, if I'm being honest, I wasn't 100% sure who I was. This book helped me to understand who I am. It's been a really interesting, very, very interesting sort of cathartic process, this writing a book thing, because how I've sort of come to describe it is it feels like Success Curious is an accumulation from the first version of me. And because I have taken the extreme measure of writing a book to download it from my mind and into a work of a book, it feels like I have the space and freedom in my mind to be the evolved version of me that I've been getting increasingly frustrated about because I've not managed to get to where I wanted to be, or I've not felt like an evolved version of myself. And this book's most certainly helped me go towards that, more than all of the therapy that I've done, pretty much. It's a really, really interesting feeling, having that sort of space in your brain to just be open and be free and to think differently and to think more critically and take all the knowledge and information that I gained from doing all the research and really having a much more solid understanding of humans, humanity, the meaning of success for society, for individuals, for sections of society, for demographics, for geographies. This whole thing has helped me to really hone in and understand what I was designed to do. Now, because the podcast and the book are kind of sort of in sync, right? They are sort of in tune with one another. Hence why I've rebranded the podcast to match the book, because there's a lot of quotes from the podcast and from podcast guests that are in the book anyway to highlight certain things. It's all helped me. These conversations that I've had on my podcast and the book that I've written have both helped me over the course of last year to realize that my purpose for existing in life is to make success more accessible. I've always known, I've always had this thing where I've been able to help people in a conversation, right? Where they, just the other day, I had someone say to me, you've done more for me in 11 minutes than I've managed to do in years, which is not me bragging, but it's sort of been a common theme in my life, right? But I just dismiss it as them just, fluffing my bum and whatever. But you don't realize sometimes how much impact you do create. Or even if someone tells you how much impact you've created, you don't give yourself the chance to take it in properly. Because, we all struggle with receiving, which is something that Mitch Scott talked about in our episode on the podcast, which is I revisit that conversation. I would highly recommend everybody revisits that conversation, because receiving in society is one of the things that we are the least good at. We are, in many cases, we are so bad at receiving, whether it's compliments, whether it's knowledge, whether it's feedback, whether it's love, whether it's respect, whether it's adoration, admiration, whatever it is. We're really shit at it. And it's something that I've been working on to take with a bit more grace, and to really give myself a chance to actually accept and consume and absorb. Because the thing is, loads of people have been really, really kind over my trip in giving me all this amazing feedback and all this sort of stuff, but I've never taken any of it in. And when you think about it in the sense of me not receiving it, it kind of throws it back in the face of whoever gave it, because they're making the effort to give me positivity or feedback or criticism or whatever. But if I'm not willing to take it in, then it renders their efforts useless and pointless and really is insulting to them. And I don't want to be insulting. So I've been really working hard on that. And this book certainly helped with that. So if you are thinking that you need to write a book because you feel like you're potentially about to start a new chapter, or you feel like you're ready to start a new chapter, then this process is going to be the key that unlocks the door that you've been struggling to open. It really is. Now, the final thing that this has taught me is that you're not defined by the things that define you. You are defined by the things that you decide to and get done. You're defined by the things that you decide to do and get done. Don't know if I've articulated that well enough. But what I mean basically is, because of diagnoses and the limitations that I had sort of come to understand within myself in terms of my attention span, my unwillingness, I have an amazing idea, get started and get bored, right? Which is shit. But to prove to myself that I can go against the definitions that have been put onto me and the definitions that I've put onto myself, I can go against the tide of those and produce something that is so the opposite of what my DNA suggests I can do, proves to me, and again, I'm trying not to sound cliche here, but it proves to me that if I really want to, and I've got a bit of pressure there, I can get shit done. I don't have to justify me not doing something with an excuse that I then accept as reality. I can see my brain running towards me with the excuse that's going to validate me not completing a task, and I can tell it to stop. I can tell it to get stuffed. I can tell my brain to pay attention to what I want to do and go to work on getting it done. It's only taken me nearly 41 years to work that one out. So if you haven't worked that one out, then don't worry. You ain't the only one. But you can. And because I have proven to myself that I can control my brain, it's now allowing me to accept a lot of the things that I have known about, seen, heard, and actually plug them into my existence, plug them into my identity. Things like something that I put out on social media not too long ago. In order to be loved, you need to be prepared to be hated. Or I think the phrase that I said was, you need to be prepared to be hated in order to be loved. Because without hate, there is no love. Love is an energy. Love is a force. In order to define love, you need a force that's working in the opposite direction. Because otherwise, you can't define love. There has to be an opposite emotion in order to define the good one. So that is one thing that you see it happen, whether it's subconsciously or consciously with some people, and they talk about, I get plenty of hate in the comment section and blah, 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 and it's water off a duck's back and all that sort of stuff. I'm not saying that hate will be like a water off a duck's back for me, because no one likes to be hated, but I'm prepared to accept being hated, or I'm prepared to accept being disagreed with, or I'm prepared to have people, and I know there already are, be a bit of an arsehole behind my back. That's totally cool. Because then that will allow me to not only go out there and feel truly connected to the people that want to be connected to me, but it will help me to love myself that much more. Another thing that I've learned about this, which is something that I've mentioned already, but I'll reiterate. This thing has helped me to accept who I am as opposed to who and what I am not. I am like a wartime general. I am the emergency doctor in A&E. When the pressure's on, bullets are flying, things are going downhill, I'm your guy. Long-term therapists, instead of being a doctor and trying to be a therapist, I'm just comfortable being a doctor. And other people can do the therapy. Right? It's just how I am. It's who I am. I'm very, very good at opening doors to success for people. It requires them to have to walk through it. And I'm happy accepting that now, because beforehand, I really, really struggled with that, because not only did I want to open the door, but I then wanted to grab their hand and walk through that door ahead of them so that they would then follow me. It's not my door to walk through. And I'm finally comfortable with that, which is quite liberating. Now, personally, there's a couple of things that I have learned. You can't be all things to all people, which kind of goes in line with what I was talking about before. And I tried to be all things to all people, and it really did end up upsetting some people. One person that I really, really loved, which is sad, but it helped me to really understand that I can't be everything to everyone. That's a really hard one to swallow, that. Another thing is that I really need to improve the efficiency of my day to day because I've relied too much in my life to rely on the night times and things. And I'm getting old, man. I mean, shit, when the time of this recording, I'm like 3 days off my 41st birthday. I'm getting older. If you're seeing this on the video, you can see I'm getting a few more grey hairs on this rinny chin of mine. I can't sustain 4 hour sleeps. I'm finally realizing that sleep is important, which will be music to my doctor's ears. But probably the biggest thing that I've learned, which is significant, is that irrespective of how isolated or lonely that one can feel, when you're doing a process like this, because it is a tremendously isolating feeling, no one else can write the book for you. Well, they could, but if you're doing it this way, you're on your own. It doesn't mean that you have to feel like you're on your own. It was actually Hiba, which I've got to appreciate her for this. When I was really struggling for motivation at one stage, she said, do it for your kids. This is for your legacy. This is something that your kids can look back on and say, my dad did that. Which was a really amazing lesson and an incredible observation that she made. And I've got to be grateful for that. Because she's true. She's right. I have, when that book came through and it got delivered to me earlier in January 2025, I had Eliza next to me and we opened it up. And on the front of the book, I have a dedication. And it's dedicated to my two kids, the two most incredible things that I've ever been privileged enough to be associated with. And it says, to Eliza, who saved me, and to Cal, who made me. All my love, Dad. Now, irrespective of whether people think the book's shit, great, it sells 5 copies, 1,500, 5,000, whatever, they now see that their old man has done something. It's not to say that they've ever made me feel like they're not proud of me or whatever in any way, shape, or form, but I have done something that they can be really, really proud of. And that's just the best. So just because you're doing an isolated journey doesn't mean that you are not by yourself. And in this instance, I've got 2 little humans that are with me the whole way. So whether this thing goes well or not, it's almost irrelevant. Anyway, team, that is a bit of an intro into my process in writing this book. Bit heavier than I think you were thinking, right? It really was. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But as I'm hoping you can feel and I'm hoping you can hear, it was really fucking hard. Well, fuck me, it was worth it. Because the shit that's changed, and I'm not even talking career, it might not do much to my career. I don't know. It's not out yet. But for me, in terms of my life, yeah, worth it. Anyway, team, if you want to grab a copy, then please do. The whole purpose of it is to make success more accessible. Nothing in there is going to be things that, you probably would have all heard of plenty of it, aside from 1 or 2 bits. But hopefully the way that I articulate them and relate them to real life, hopefully that will help you to feel that these elements that go into making success for you in your life, they feel more tangible. I feel that this Success Curious book is the first step in helping people when it comes to making success more accessible. And if you can read this book and you can take that first step, you're a lot closer to realizing success in the context of your life than you thought you were. That's pretty cool. Anyway, gang, I'm going to love you and leave you. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. If you want to grab a copy of the book, I'll put it in the show notes, but you can head to andyreid.com.au, purchase it from there, or do a little search and you will find it on Amazon. I would highly recommend that you do that. That would be wonderful. Till next time, gang, look after yourselves and each other, and we'll get the guests back on as of next week. Take care, team.